Thank you.
Great
Me too.
job. That was incredible.
Thank you so much.
So I like to get to know how a project was created two ways. One is physical production, and the other one is actually the themes or what you want to do creatively. So do you want to start with what attracted you to the character, or do you want to start with how you got it made?
As you wish, really.
Okay. So I guess we'll start with the character. I know from personal research that Zorro is considered public domain now. And so is that, with you, your creative hat on, were you thinking about what's the easiest way to get the rights to a well-known character and reinvent in a way that people haven't seen before? Or did you just grow up loving the serials and the books and the movies?
Okay, so the funny thing is, as you're absolutely right, Zorro is in public domain, but the cape is not.
Okay.
It's true.
Really?
Yeah, it's not intellectual property, it's industrial property.
Okay.
And so, in fact, it's very difficult for us or in France to have like the right for Zorro, and it was a very long process. The whole process took 6 years, but like for 1 year we lost the right to the cape, and then we got them back and whatnot. Wow. Because without the rights, you could really be sued, by Sony or whatnot, and you could not go to Paramount and say, hey, I want to make a TV show, and I don't have to. So that's just a funny fact, but it's not that easy to go on Zorro.
Right.
And then the producer, Marc Dujardin, who's Jean's brother, when he came to me, he came to Noé, he already had like a small idea of doing it like a political, in a political way, and we liked this angle, and we plunged into it. And the second thing is when he said to me, do you want to make a Zorro? I asked myself my favorite question, which is how would Lubitsch do it? And I was like, oh my God, maybe I can make a vaudeville where the husband and the lover are the same person, and so.
Well, let's talk about that for a second. So, I mean, it's a superhero story you've just told that's also very political, you just mentioned. So my degree is political science with an emphasis on international relations and a focus on the Middle East, and I'm a big superhero nerd. So every time I read comic books or watch comic movies, I always say, what's the political story they're trying to tell? And there's so many modern elements that you've hit here with, workers' rights, even with the sergeant having his emotional letter where he gets to say, how the many ways he's been hurt. Even spicing things up at the end of the bedroom is all very modern, and yet you tell it in a story that's takes place almost 180 years ago, 140 years ago. I'll do math later. So to that point, I wrote a couple of notes down, but you mentioned, let's just start with, we mentioned the romantic, the husband angle of it all. Okay, so one thing that is always prevalent in most superhero stories, Clark Kent, Superman, Peter Parker, Spider-Man, is that they are great butt kickers, and they suck with the babes. So why don't we talk about the dichotomy of how interesting it is to have a guy who is going unseen in front of his wife with the mask off and yet comes alive with the mask on, and you nailed it.
Yeah. Well, of course, yeah, the other superhero also played with a team. We proceed also with this political angle, which is like Don Diego de la Vega. He's like a very democratic man with very great ideas, but absolutely no charisma. No charisma whatever. He's like powerless. Everyone steps onto him, even his dead father, And so that's why you have, but he wants to be good because he's the alcalde of the town. He wants to be exemplary. He has to make the law apply. And that's what we wanted. We wanted him to be like really in a corner. I mean, he can just be Zorro. He has to be Zorro because he has to hide. If he had to fight like for something that was illegal, he could just fight as Don Diego. But the problem is like everything Don Emmanuel does is legal, and that's why he's powerless, because he's in front of somehow capitalism, and that's why you have to call upon Zorro and you have to break on the other side, and that mixes with another way I built the show, which is a very Freudian way. Like Don Diego is like a reality principle, and Zorro is really a pulsion of pleasure. And I think most of superhero has this kind of
dichotomy. Absolutely.
Background.
Yeah, and that's so prevalent in the character and what you've done. I know that there's a lot of existing stories, and they've done, Fairbanks launched United Artists with the Zorro property. I haven't learned this in my research. Is the 20-year gap, is that original to your story?
Yeah.
So let's talk about that for a second. So I wrote down a couple of notes. I want to give you a couple of compliments, and if I offend a couple of people that I work with, that's okay. So the last year and a half, there's been movies The Flash, Deadpool and Wolverine, and even going back a little bit further, The Rise of Skywalker. And you have 3 characters in there, Michael Keaton, Mark Hamill, and Hugh Jackman reprising their characters 20 years later. And in all 3 versions, they're all drunk losers. I mean, there's a way to put it that's better than that, but they're all, sitting around and whining. This is a character who 20 years later is rising to the occasion and trying to be a superhero in real life. I think that's such a refreshing way to do it, and it really excited me as just an audience member that, oh, look, our heroes can return aged and wiser and not weaker or looking for a hero to save them. So let's talk about what made you come to that conclusion.
Sure. So first, there's something about doing it with Jean Dujardin. Jean was the first talk we had. He really wanted, and that was okay with me, to be 50. I mean, he's 50, and so now Zorro is 50. So you have to tackle upon that subject. So that's for one. And yeah, I wanted him to have evolved. Like violence is no solution. Like being like a populist hero is not the solution. You have like just simple answers to complex question. I mean, here in episode 2, Zorro frees everyone, but he breaks the water tower, Is this really a good idea? Who is going to build the water tower, Now it's Don Diego, and this is hard, You have to raise tax and you're unpopular about it. But this is like long-term solutions, but hard ones.
That's the perfect way to put it. So it kind of goes on what I was hinting at a moment ago, is that you've created, again, it keeps using the term superhero, a superhero character who is more aware of his surroundings. Like there was a series that NBC put together a couple years ago in conjunction with DC that told the story about what does Gotham look like after all the destruction happens. Who comes and cleans this stuff up? And there's always been this trope that, maybe the superhero character is somewhat for younger audiences or younger people who may not necessarily think about the consequences of the future. So again, from a fan point of view, I'm just telling you did a great job creating a character who is trying to be mature and an adult while playing in, let's say, the younger world. So yeah, very well done there. So let's talk, if you want to comment on that, we can. Okay. So speaking of Zorro, you mentioned you had Marc first and then Jean came on?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So
how's how that happened?
So we wrote the first script, so the pilot and some basic arcs, and then we lost the right of the cape, and then we wait so like 1 year and a half before we could make it read to Jean. And the good thing is when Jean read it, we had lunch, and he immediately was very excited about it. He saw how he would have fun playing both characters, and so that's how it got.
I mean, that's lightning in a bottle, so I'm not going to do too much detail about something I have here, but I'm in the middle of shopping a network procedural. And so we have a co-creator, and we have our meetings, and we're, high-level stuff, everything's going great, yada, yada. The one thing we haven't done yet is had our talent meeting. And from a writer to writer, what is that like when you have your talent meeting? Because luckily it worked. I mean, Jean kicks butt here. This is phenomenal performance, and it's definitely going to be something great for everyone involved. But how did you feel? Did you know immediately when you sat down that this is my Zorro? Did you have any notes for him? Did he give you notes? How did you guys arrive to the character we just saw?
Well, with a little bit of time now that went by, I have to say, luckily for me, I was younger and I didn't have that much experience, because, to be honest, if you didn't nail Jean, the show would just not be made, So I would have just spent 3 years of my life for nothing, because I don't really know who else could play.
Is Jean in the room? Did he hear that?
This part as well. I mean, he knows it.
Okay, good.
But so yeah, it was a lot of pressure, and at the same time, what can you do about it? The only thing I can do is I can try to write it as best as I can. I can try to do an analysis of Jean's part before, and how my script is really building on his strengths, and at the same time offering some parts of his acting that I didn't see that often, which is him being like weak, and I think he's very funny and very good at that, and we didn't see that. So I just tried to make the part really for him. Hopefully it worked.
Yeah, it definitely worked. One scene I liked really in particular, I'm sure everybody did, was before the water tower collapsed. I always love when there's romantic dialogue between a couple that takes place between punches. It's just reminding me a little bit of Indiana Jones, little Raven Marianne there. Okay, so let's talk about the culture clash of it all. So it's a story that takes place in California, and it's above and below the border, but it comes from a French production. And did anybody notice that? Did anybody have a problem with a French Zorro? It all worked for me. How did you do that so seamlessly?
Is it? That's my question. You know, I don't know. That's what I would always tell even to the distributor. Yeah, I mean, I know. Zorro is like a Spanish character. He lives in California and he speaks French. You know, what do you want? So my idea was when I did the artistic direction of it all, try to be as real as possible. I made an extensive amount of research to know where I was accurate and when I was not. And so for me, for the art director, for the production designer, we had like very, very long talk about how it should look like. And we often said, if we turn off the sound, we just have to see an epic Zorro classic, you know. And if you put the sound, they do quite a lot of silly things, and it's pretty funny, you know. But it had to look real because all these elements you
Yeah, the production design is incredible. I was just on a series for Amazon MGM in Athens this year where we did horse training every day and costumes, and everything that I saw there is as good or better. And to have that kind of quality in the middle of dust and horses, and I don't know if anybody here has shot outside before, but to do this kind of production, as many outdoor exteriors you guys did, and to not, well, it could have been a nightmare, I wasn't there, but you can't tell. So a lot of credit to the crew in that as well. So without knowing too much about, obviously, where the rest of the season goes, and not knowing what your deal looks like, is there something you're looking for as far as Zorro Season 2? What's the next step for this story? Is there one?
No, there's no season 2. First, because the show is quite an entity, and I tried to. I mean, there's like an analysis of Zorro in the whole show, and I tried to bring it back together very intègre. I don't know, very full, very untouched. So there's like more adaptations, and I'm eager to see other adaptations of Zorro.
Cool.
But this is this is
This is your version of the character.
Yeah, exactly. This is my take. I don't have any.
Until it's a massive hit, and then Paramount goes Zorro too. All right, so let me ask you another, as writer to writer, if you could, what was when you took this on, what were you trying to tell? Because a lot of times when I write, I try to see myself as that character, so I'm sure there's a little Zorro in you. What kind of inspired you to look for that kind of character who fights for the common good, who wants to get things done, who tries to be brave in a scary setting? How much of that comes from you?
Should I do an honest answer?
Yeah, or lie if it's better.
Maybe I can lie, you know.
Yeah.
I guess the place where I put in myself is like, I don't know about you, but you know, every people I know, and even myself, if I'm a little bit honest with myself, I'm like, I'm not sure if I'm only the person I look like, you know. Sure, I try to be the best husband as I can be, the best dad I can be, you know. And yet, you know, there's other things going on, you know, and it's hard, you know. You have to fight against sometimes a person to destroy yourself, you know. I mean, at least sometime I struggle with that. And I think we do a lot of us do, and I think this is like not said out loud like I'm doing right now in a mic, just because it's hard, and I understand this. And so I liked the idea of, you know, playing with this idea in a very, you know, how would you say pudique? Humble way, you know. Like
He's being very Don Diego right now. Does anybody notice that?
Am I?
You're being very Don Diego.
Some Don Diego in me.
No, but what I think what I can tell, you know, trying to relate to people, just meeting them, is that, like I said, I see myself in some of my characters. So I certainly, now getting to know you, see a little bit of Zorro in you. So you're definitely somebody who, I'm just guessing, but from, you know, observation, would probably stand up for the common good, or try to intervene and do the right thing, or be a good father, be a good husband. So, I mean, he's nodding. Okay, that's a little bit of Zorro. I think that's all we're gonna get on that front. But that's very cool, and it really comes across authentically in the character and the setting. I love it when heroes write heroes. So that's very cool. Okay, what have we not touched upon yet? Are there fun set stories that we need to know? Anything hilarious or embarrassing?
We were lucky, you know, to be honest, because so we shot every interiors around Madrid, in the north of Spain, and all the exteriors in the south of Spain, in Almeria. And of course, we're like a pretty big French production, but if we compare to the United States, we're broke, you know. We have like, so we could not have one insurance. So when we built all the sets, they told us, we asked them, is it okay? Does it rain here? And they said, no, it doesn't rain. I mean, it rains. One day a year, maybe. Okay, and what happens when it rains? You know, it floods all the mud, and everything get destroyed, and so, you know, for the whole show, I was like, if it rains, it's over. We don't have insurance. We cannot rebuild whatever we did, you know. The only fun fact is like, I didn't make a heart attack during the show. That's, I don't know, you know.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
So did it rain? How bad?
No, it didn't rain.
Thank
That's
God,
why.
okay.
That's why there's a show. I mean,
All right.
that's just the bottom line, you know. That's
Yeah.
what
I mean,
our
so that's
trade
living
is.
on the edge. I know where you're going. You wake up every morning saying, oh, my God, check the weather report, because if not, you're ruined. It's a lot of pressure, but I always think that adds to the quality of the production when people are trying to hold on. Okay, and then so as you've co-created with Noé, and what's that partnership look like? How long have you two known each other? How did you meet? What brought you together on Zorro? I've seen some of his work, A Nice Jewish Boy, and him directing that as well. But how did the Zorro connection come between the two of you?
Sure. So we known each other since like 13 years. We share the same office space since 10, and we read each other's stuff. So we know each other very well. And so the first thing is like, Marc at first went to see Noé to do Zorro, and Noé, knowing me very well, said, I think Zorro is totally your stuff. You should come with me, and you should, you know, showrun it, because you're going to have more fun than I with that, you know. And 2 years later, maybe, HBO Max came to me to do a TV show about like a rabbi, a woman rabbi. And I said to Noé, I think you should come along and direct and be the showrunner of this show. So we created, in fact, 2 shows,
Wow.
and I showrunned one, and he showrunned.
The quid pro quo, but it worked.
Yeah, exactly, because we knew right from the beginning that we had like different sensibility, different artistic ways of seeing things, and there must be one clear vision for a show. It cannot be 2. So I was happy to be his right arm on his show, and he was mine, and that's amazing when you work with someone as talented as Noé, which is.
And some of the best shows ever done are always, most of them are co-created by. I'm just thinking of things like Twin Peaks, and we have a great visionary come and then have someone who balances them out and has a good back and forth. I love when projects like that come together. What was your favorite part of seeing the production come together? What was that one moment when you were on set and you're like, ooh, goosebumps, Zorro's real?
So there's many. So the first time you see Jean in the costume is pretty amazing, because he is Zorro and he's sexy.
It
It's
works.
Like, I mean, come on, wow.
There's a lot of yas in the crowd. All right. Okay.
Yeah, he is. You know, and there's like one. It's a little scene, but it made me realize something about cinema and TV shows. Maybe it's in the first episode where Don Diego de la Vega, right after his father's death, he just goes by the indigenous neighborhood to go to the town hall. And so we shot these scenes one day, and just for a moment, you know, I was like, of course it was not exactly like that, but I was back in time. It's not like that they recreated something that, you know, cinema was like the ultimate time machine, and it was there, you know. I don't know.
That's wonderful. No, it totally came across. I really appreciated in the pilot episode all the fox references. As soon as you open, you have a fox right there, and you have a fox sitting on his mantle before he goes into the cave. It's interesting that Zorro, it means fox, but the character is never actually associated with fox. So I thought it was a very nice, subtle piece you put in there. Just to bond on a personal level, I mean, my own father had a heart attack and passed away right when I came into my success and started getting through and a little bit more known. And I've had, even back then, dreams where I had quote-unquote unresolved issues and got to use that time to talk and learn about my own connections. So just on a personal level, that part was great and really authentic. Where did that come from, the inspiration for the father being a ghost?
Well, weirdly enough, the whole pilot came to me pretty quickly, like, which doesn't happen that often. You know, most often you just write and rewrite sounds on time, which we did also. But I mean, the idea of having like a ghost of a father just was there. You know, I don't know why. And yeah, but it's if I have to relate, I mean, my dad was still alive when I began the writing, but he passed away after, and he didn't get to see the show. And so this is weird, you know, because now there's like a ghost of a dad, which of course had some resemblance with my dad, but not all of it. So I don't know.
I
I got some unresolved issues as well.
I mean, everybody who has a fandom of superheroes notices the same thing. Uncle Ben passing away, Bruce's parents passing away, which, by the way, fun fact, many of the iterations of Bruce Wayne's origin story have him and his parents coming out of the Legend of Zorro with Tyrone Power. And so there's very much, connections, father figures, mother figures. So we're being told to wrap. Is there anything that you haven't been asked that you would like your audience to know about the story?
No. I thank you for those great questions.
How many episodes?
Oh, sorry, there's 8 of them.
8 of them. And more importantly, where can we buy them? How do we see them?
For now, I don't know. I know we're maybe trying to deal with like a network, but I so much.
Can I help you with that?
Please do. I mean, I would love the show to be seen in the US. So
okay.